Apparently, people are worried that Zany has a bit of a problem in Wuthering Waves. Zany might be one of the most hyped up characters of all time for WUA, and a lot of people are concerned about it. Me personally, I'm not. I know Kuro has done an amazing job balancing all pre-existing characters, so let's see exactly what people's concerns are, and let's talk about them, huh?
Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's time for us to address the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room when it comes to negative status effects, what they're doing in Wuthering Waves, and some of the issues that a lot of players are kind of having with their implementation. Because it is no surprise at all, and it's no lie at all, to say that Zani, who we're seeing over here, we've got a bit of her kit pulled up, is going to be one of the most reliant characters in the game. And the reason why—
See, I haven't heard anything about this. I've heard that she's fine with Spectral Rover. I have not heard anything of her saying that she's over-reliant on any specific characters, but we'll see.
Why I'm saying one of the most reliant characters is because she functionally will not be able to do pretty much anything in her kit if she doesn't have a resonator on her team that's able to inflict Spectral Frazzle on enemies. Because, well, she's not able to build up her helical embers, which are essentially required to build up her blaze, and that blaze is required to actually deal damage in her liberation, which is the main source of her damage. And the thing is, a lot of people are looking at this and drawing comparisons to other titles. They're drawing comparisons to games like Genshin Impact. Let's just go ahead and actually take a look at some of the comments that I've been getting.
I would probably say that kit would be more similar to Honkai Star Rail because Honkai Star Rail really likes selling you team players and not singular units. That being said, I'm confused why Spectral Rover wouldn't be able to do this for her.
On my recent video, Zani's kit is a disaster, where I said that Zani's kit was a disaster, and I was mainly referring to, A, how fucking long it was, and not necessarily the intricacies weaved into a lot of its interdependencies. And so, I just made this post over here saying, you will not be able to leverage the full power of Zani's kit without Phoebe. You cannot reach full blaze in a regular rotation with Spectral Rover. You'll likely only be able to reach 60 out of 70 stacks. This will cause Zani's Inferno mode to deal significantly less damage with less of her enhanced heavy attacks. You'll also—
I'm not really worried if the kit can't reach its max potential, if its partial potential can clear all the content in the game. If it can blow through all the content in the game, I'm not really too pressed about it personally.
also miss out on Phoebe's 100% Spectral Frazzle amplification.
Because I'll be real, so many people told me that Brant was going to be underwhelming unless he had 280% energy regen, and he was completely fine with 260 and a free-to-play weapon. So yeah, I feel like there's a lot of doom posing for characters in this game because a lot of people really want to draw the comparisons between Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail, but I'll be real, I take all of these concerns with a massive grain of salt until I actually play them myself.
On her outro skill, which will be a major hit to her DPS. And so let's go ahead, let's take a look at that. Let's sort of break down what a lot of my thoughts are in regards to some of the responses. I think there's one in particular that really stands out in this situation. You dropped Sitlali and Mavuika for Phoebe and Zani. It's more of the same corporate greed. At least you'll be fueling the competition, and that's good for the consumer. And so this is the thing. A lot of people are bringing in Sitlali and Mavuika as two characters that heavily synergize with each other, right?
Well, the other really big issue with Sitlali and Mavuika was that they dropped them on the exact same patch, on the exact same week cycle, right? That's why a big issue with them have happened. Now, I'll be real, Honkai Star Rail's been doing this since day one, and I'll also be completely real, I'm not a fan of it if they were to do that, but this seems like a one-time occurrence. Obviously, it could be bad because it has been very nice where Wuthering Waves characters can be used with pretty much anything else, but I don't really think it sets any type of groundbreaking precedent, to be completely honest.
And do way more damage than everybody else.
How do you guys feel about characters that are reliant on other characters to be fully optimal? I pulled on a lot of those in Honkai Star Rail. It definitely doesn't feel great, but I don't really think it's really disastrous.
But I think that
especially when it's just like an outlier and not the rule.
A lot of people aren't really recognizing is that, well, the damage numbers introduced by Sitlali and Mavuika are way above and...
Phoebe is on the rerun banner with Zany? Yeah, sure, but she already had a release, right? So this is Phoebe's rerun, not her release banner.
Beyond anything that has been in the game before. And what I want to do, or what I want to show you all, right, is a bit of data, a bit of some simulations that people have been running to indicate how strong some of these units are. So now that we're going ahead and we're taking a look at some of this data, let's just go ahead and see what Mavuika and Sitlali actually do when it comes to damage. And so if I just zoom in over here, I'm looking at the DPS of all of these different teams that have Mavuika and Sitlali on them. What you're going to notice is that the team DPS is all above 6 digits. Every single team that features those two characters has a team DPS that exceeds 6 digits. And this is the thing, right? When you look at any other team that doesn't have Sitlali in there, we're seeing DPSs like 90k, 70k, 91, 79, 89, 74, blah, blah, blah. And you can see that there's a big...
So having those two characters together quite literally doubles their damage. I would love to see how that works with Honkai Star Rail, with follow-up attack synergy and dot synergy. And remembrance synergy.
Big gap. However, one thing you also have to keep in mind is that these numbers over here, 90, 70, 91, 79, 89, 74, that's the damage that every other team in the game does. That is the damage that every other team in the game does. Your meta New Valette teams, your meta Al-Haytham teams, your meta Zhao teams, they're doing DPS like this. And the fact of the matter is that when you go over and then you combine Mavuika and Sitlali together, they're doing so much more damage than every other team in the game. And that is when, ladies and gentlemen, this whole situation in Genshin Impact becomes much more of a problem. Because guess what? When you have the damage in the game getting that high, when you combine Mavuika and Sitlali together, then that means that some other stuff needs to occur. Like, and let me just pull it up. Let me just pull up a recent example of it.
You have to
look
balance
at this
up.
video that I made in the past.
That
directly shows you, ladies and gentlemen, what happens to the end game and its HP.
Absolutely.
Mavuika and Sitlali release.
Been saying this for years.
To a massive.
And that's why people don't understand that with global passives being added into Honkai Star Rail, they're going to balance the game around global passives. What Hoyo's game's motto is, create a problem and sell the solution.
Issue with the Spiral Abyss becoming too easy and a ridiculous amount of HP inflation. And this is the thing when it comes to Zani, and this is the thing when it comes to her interactions with Phoebe. We don't actually know yet how much higher, if Zani and Phoebe is higher, how much higher their DPS is going to be when you're combining it and comparing it to...
I would say worst case scenario, it's a 38% DPS increase. But that's a hell of a lot less bad than a 100% DPS increase. And the other thing is, and also to be fair to Genshin, can you still clear all the content in spite of that?
To other teams in the game. Is Zani
Without
and
that big
Phoebe,
buff.
is that going to have bigger damage than, say, let's be honest here, right? A Carlotta combined with a Jeja? We don't know yet. And if it does, if Zani plus Phoebe is way higher damage than Carlotta and Jeja to a point where they outcompete every other team in the game, because I do believe Carlotta and Jeja is the highest single target
they'd have to balance
team
up
right
like
now.
hard,
If they're
like
2
crazy.
times the damage, Zani and Phoebe, compared to
terrible.
every other team, then
It'd be
it's an
fucking
issue. Then it's a problem. However, if
Absolutely.
it turns out that Zani plus Phoebe only compares to a Carlotta and Jeja,
38% is still high? Oh, trust me, guys. I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree with y'all.
and without Phoebe, Zani's just not really a good character that doesn't do enough damage, then that really just means that Zani isn't a good character. That doesn't mean that the meta of the game is going to be absolutely absurd. That doesn't mean that every other team is like in danger and that we're going to need a ridiculous amount of power creep in the tower to deal with the new damage ceilings. This isn't going to mean that the game's going to turn into a Genshin Impact where Mavuika and Sitlali literally went ahead and busted the DPS ceilings in the game.
Yeah, I guess that's actually crazy because that just might mean that Zany is underwhelming unless you get Phoebe and then she's balanced, not a Malvika and then you get Sitlali and then they break the fucking game. Which actually might discourage a lot of people from pulling Zany knowing that she's not busted.
Through the roof because they're literally like 30, 40k higher than every other team you're seeing. Like 30, 40, 50k higher than other teams. Almost double what they're at right now. And this is the thing, right? We have other gacha games to look at as well. You got HSR and ZZZ, where Miyabi's literally double the damage of other units
That's
coming
fucking
in
insane.
with how absurdly powerful she was. Just by herself. We have characters like Firefly being way higher than others. Combos like Zhao Kui and Acheron being the highest upon their release because of how well they synergize together.
Ridiculous.
And then characters like Rappa in their Super Break lineup
I ain't gonna lie, Rappa was nuts.
doing again.
She's on the same level as Carlotta. And see, that's great. Now, here's the thing. Carlotta isn't entirely broken. Carlotta is just so fucking easy to play, it makes her feel broken. Whereas other characters, you kind of have to think. but you can still get the same numbers as Carlotta numbers. But with Carlotta, you don't even got to fucking think. And so as long as all the characters are in the same ballpark, I got no issues.
Way more than everybody else that came before them, other than combining two essential pieces together. And
Still
this
hate
is the thing.
Rappa. I think she's
If
the funnest
Wuwa
character to
goes
use in Honkai
ahead
Star Rail.
and they make these interactions that Zani has with Spectral Frazzle too strong, then it will be called out. Then that's something for us to talk about. But if in this situation, Zani is just the same level of power as a Carlotta Jeja team when she's with Phoebe, and then Zani's output with Spectral Rover is just really bad, then it's more of a Zani issue than it is a game issue. That means that Kuro Games is basically going to be releasing characters like Zani who don't necessarily have the same damage potential as others without their premium option. And that would just mean that Zani doesn't have a lot of great free-to-play options. And that's not necessarily the worst thing ever, right? Because when you have Carlotta and you use her with a character...
I can still see people being worried, but I'd rather the game not get power crept and every character be left behind. Like, I want you to understand how bad for the game it is, where if you have Phoebe and Zany and they double the damage of everybody else, versus if you only have Zany and no Phoebe, she's only dealing 70% of the damage of everything else, right? Because it leads to a game state where you can still use whatever you want to use, because the game doesn't need to go up to keep up with how strong they're making the characters. So, to be honest, I'm actually okay with this, but I can see some people getting concerned if they wanted the broken unit.
Character like Yang Yang, or you use Carlotta with a character like Tao Chi, that team isn't doing nearly as much damage as when she's using it with a character like Jeja. Similarly, if you're using a...
Oh, and by the way, we just got a lot of fucking subs, and I want to say thank you so much. Yo, Oilers, gifters, I appreciate the fuck out of y'all.
Let's just look over here. If you're using a Jinsei, and then you proceed to use that Jinsei with a Yan Wu, you're not dealing nearly as much damage in this team as you are using a character like Jinsei with, say, a Cantarella. Because Yan Wu has no outro skill, essentially, that damages the enemy. And then Cantarella would come in and give Jinsei a nice resonant skill damage boost, while still giving coordinated attacks that'll buff Jinsei's Forte circuit. And so you'll simply just be doing less damage with the free-to-play teams. And similarly, using Zhang Liao with a, let's just say maybe like a John Shin or a Yang Yang, your Zhang Liao is not going to do as much damage as if you were using them with a Yinlin. Because Yinlin's got the best outro skill in the game for buffing Zhang Liao's damage. And so this is the thing, right? We'll have to wait and see just how high the damage ceilings go when Phoebe is used with Zani. And if at the end of the day, the damage is, you know, the same or even lower than what we're seeing for the top tier teams like Carlotta with Jeja, I don't think it's necessarily a huge issue. However, what I do think would be an issue is that if the damage doesn't exceed the top performing teams, then that just means that Zani without Phoebe is really, really, really bad. And if Zani without Phoebe is absolutely awful, is not really good at all, then that's more of a Zani issue and a roster issue than it is.
And I also like how that opens up Zany to grow with the release of upcoming characters, rather than having the characters have to grow to outperform Zany, right? And I think we're seeing characters like Jian get better as more modes are being implemented into the game, rather than having to buff pre-existing modes to keep up with the new character's power creep. So I think it's very good.
Is a balance issue with the game. Because that just means that, A, we need more options that would be able to apply Spectral Frazzle on the roster. Because
Saint Crying Wolf yet again, I don't think he's doing that whatsoever. I think he's actually being very reasonable.
ladies and gentlemen, right? Spectral Rover does not provide enough Spectral Frazzle in their kit to fully fuel Zani's Forte circuit, her Blaze. And if we simply have another character that can apply Spectral Frazzle, maybe in higher quantities, but then also simply not have as much of an amplification ability as Phoebe, because she's got 100% amplification on her outro skill in Confession mode, then that would make it a better, more free-to-play friendly, or really low-budget option for Zany. But currently, in the state of the game that we have right now, Zany either has a premium option that's going to be likely incredibly fucking strong, or Zany simply has a more budget option that doesn't get close to the level in performance that the premium option has. And that's a little bit unfortunate. There should be a bit more of a stopgap, in my opinion, between Spectral Rover right now and the current state of Phoebe, where Phoebe's like a crazy good buffer from what we're seeing on paper, and then Spectral Frazzle can't even slightly compare to her buffing potential. Yep. And in the long run, right, it is going to have a bit of problems for the overall longevity of Zany's kit if she doesn't have somebody else that can apply up to 15 plus 16, 17, 18 frazzle stacks, because she needs a lot of frazzle stacks to be able to convert all of these frazzle stacks to helical embers, and then give her the blaze she needs to actually deal damage in this kit.
I think this is the part where Saint Tone is going to talk in circles, but I think Zany is going to be absolutely fine. And I think it's better that the company pushes out units that aren't completely going to obliterate the pre-existing ones that might do better with a premium option than release characters that obliterate every single character in the game. So me personally, I think it's a great move. And honestly, I'm shocked that Zany didn't break the fucking game like I thought she was. So I guess it's another scenario of pull this character if you want to, and if not, it's okay. And personally, I like when gacha games do that. That's just my opinion. Like, comment, subscribe. First announcement, guys. I'm gay.